There are moments in life when the road ahead looks completely blocked. You've prayed, you've waited, you've tried everything you know how to do, and still nothing seems to move. Doors remain shut, resources feel limited, strength feels exhausted. But it is in these moments that faith is not proven by comfort, but by trust. God has never been limited by circumstances. What looks like an ending to you is often the place where God begins to work in ways you cannot yet see. When there was no road through the Red Sea, God made a way. When there was no food in the wilderness, God provided manna. When there was no hope left, God sent help right on time. God's provision does not always arrive early, but it is never late. He provides strength when you feel weak, peace when your mind is overwhelmed, and direction when you feel lost. Sometimes the way God provides is not by changing the situation immediately, but by changing you, giving you endurance, wisdom, and courage to keep moving forward. God's provision operates on a level far beyond what human logic can measure or predict. People often assess situations based on what they can see. Bank accounts, opportunities, connections, time, or strength. When these appear insufficient, the natural conclusion is that provision is impossible. But God is not bound by what is visible, measurable, or available to human understanding. What looks like lack to you is never lack to Him. Human circumstances are temporary and constantly changing, but God's resources are eternal and unlimited. He does not depend on favorable conditions to act. He does not need perfect timing, full preparation, or ideal surroundings. God has a history of providing in situations where human solutions had completely failed. When resources run out, God steps in. When doors are closed, God creates new ones. When logic says this cannot work, God proves that His power is greater than limitation. Many people believe God provides only when things are already improving, but Scripture and experience show the opposite. God often provides when situations are at their worst, when strength is gone, when hope is fading, and when the future feels uncertain. That is often the exact moment God reveals His provision. This teaches a deeper lesson: dependence on God, not on circumstances. God's provision may not always look the way you expect. Sometimes you expect money, but God provides wisdom. You expect an open door, but God provides patience. You expect immediate relief, but God provides endurance. Each form of provision is intentional and perfectly aligned with what you truly need to grow, survive, and move forward. God sees the full picture while you see only a moment. Human limitations cannot cancel divine promises. Economic hardship, rejection, delays, or failure do not restrict God's ability to act. Even when everything around you says there is no way, God's provision operates outside that reality. He is not responding to your situation. He is ruling over it. What you face may be overwhelming, but it is never overwhelming to God. Understanding that God's provision is not limited by circumstances transforms fear into trust. It shifts focus from what you lack to who God is. It builds confidence that no matter how impossible things appear, God remains in control, fully capable, and always faithful to provide exactly what is needed at the right time. There are seasons in life when progress feels invisible. You pray, you believe, you wait, but nothing appears to change. It feels as though God is silent and inactive, and the absence of visible movement can create doubt, frustration, and fear. But the truth is this: God's greatest work often happens where human eyes cannot see. Just because you do not see a way does not mean God is not working. God works in layers, depths, and timing beyond human perception. While you focus on the problem in front of you, God is arranging people, aligning opportunities, shifting circumstances, and preparing outcomes that are not yet visible. What feels like delay is often divine preparation. God is never idle. He is always active, even in silence. Behind the scenes, God is shaping hearts, including yours. He uses waiting seasons to develop patience, humility, trust, and spiritual maturity. Many times, if the breakthrough came immediately, you would miss the lessons needed to sustain it. God knows what must be built within you with you before what He reveals He has prepared for you. The unseen work is often more important than the visible result. God also works beyond your reach, handling situations you cannot control. He moves in conversations you are not part of, opens doors you do not knock on, and closes paths that would harm you, even when you do not understand why. What you perceive as obstacles may actually be protection. What feels like stagnation may be redirection. When you see no way forward, it is often because God is creating a way that does not yet exist. He is not limited to familiar paths. He specializes in new beginnings, unexpected turns, and solutions that defy human logic. Your responsibility in these moments is not to figure everything out, but to remain faithful, obedient, and trusting. Trust grows strongest when sight is weakest. Learning to believe that God is working behind the scenes strengthens faith and deepens reliance on Him rather than on circumstances. Even when everything appears quiet, even when nothing seems to be moving, God is still orchestrating your breakthrough. His work is invisible now, but it will become undeniable in time. Our faith is not developed when everything is clear, comfortable, and predictable. It is formed and strengthened in moments when answers are absent, outcomes are unclear, and the future feels uncertain. When you cannot see what is ahead, faith becomes a decision rather than a feeling. It is choosing to trust God without needing full understanding or immediate reassurance. Uncertainty strips away false confidence, the kind that relies on plans, people, or personal ability. In these moments, you are forced to lean fully on God. This dependence is not weakness, it is spiritual strength. Faith grows when you acknowledge that you do not have control, but you trust the one who does. When certainty disappears, trust has room to deepen. God often allows uncertainty because it teaches you to walk by faith and not by sight. If every step were visible, faith would not be necessary. But when the path is hidden, every step forward becomes an act of trust. Each small decision to keep believing, praying, and obeying builds spiritual endurance and confidence in God's character rather than in circumstances. Uncertainty also exposes what you truly believe about God. When life is stable, faith can remain theoretical. But when things fall apart, faith becomes personal. You begin to understand that faith is not about having all the answers. It is about trusting God even when questions remain. This kind of faith is refined, mature, and unshakable. In uncertain seasons, God uses pressure to strengthen your spiritual foundation. Just as muscles grow through resistance, faith grows through challenge. Fear may rise, but faith grows stronger when you choose trust over anxiety. Doubts may appear, but faith deepens when you bring those doubts to God instead of walking away. Faith that is tested becomes faith that is proven. What you learn about God during uncertain times stays with you long after the season ends. You come out stronger, wiser, and more confident, not because circumstances improved, but because your trust in God was strengthened. Waiting is one of the most difficult aspects of faith. When prayers are unanswered and progress feels slow, it is easy to interpret delay as denial. But God's timing operates on wisdom, not urgency. What feels late to you is often right on time according to God's purpose. He sees the full picture, past, present, and future, while you see only the moment you are standing in. God never delays without a reason. Every waiting season carries purpose, preparation, and protection. Sometimes God waits because the situation is not ready. Other times, He waits because you are not ready. If the answer came too early, it could overwhelm you, harm you, or lead you down a path you are not prepared to walk. God's timing ensures that when provision arrives, it can be sustained. Delays also build character and deepen trust. In the waiting, patience is formed, pride is humbled, and faith is refined. God uses time to shape hearts, align motives, and strengthen spiritual maturity. What you gain during the wait often becomes just as valuable as the blessing you are waiting for. The process prepares you to handle what is coming next. God's timing is also strategic. While you are waiting, He is aligning people, circumstances, and opportunities in ways you cannot see. He is preventing premature endings and protecting you from unnecessary setbacks. What appears to be slow progress is often careful orchestration. God is not rushing because He is not reacting. He is leading. Learning to trust God's timing means surrendering control. It requires faith to believe that God knows when to act and how to act. Even when emotions say now, wisdom often says, wait, God's timing may test your patience, but it will never fail His purpose. When the moment arrives, it will be clear that the delay was not wasted, it was necessary. God rarely limits Himself to the methods people expect. When you imagine provision, you often picture a specific solution, person, or opportunity, but God works beyond human assumption. He uses people you did not expect, doors you did not plan for, and paths you did not consider. This is because God's goal is not only to meet your need, but to grow your faith and remind you that provision comes from Him, not from a single source. Unexpected provision teaches humility and gratitude. When help comes from a place you never anticipated, it becomes clear that it was not the result of your control, influence, or strategy. God often chooses unlikely channels so that His hand is unmistakable. What you thought was coincidence becomes confirmation that God is actively involved in your life. God may use ordinary moments to bring extraordinary provision. A simple conversation, a delay that changes your direction, or a closed door that forces a new path can become the very thing that leads to your breakthrough. What feels insignificant or inconvenient at the time may be the vehicle God uses to supply exactly what you need. Sometimes God provides through people who are not part of your plan. Assistance may come from strangers, former connections, or individuals you never thought would help you. Other times, God provides internally through renewed strength, clarity of mind, or peace in your spirit before He provides externally. This inner provision equips you to recognize and receive what comes next. When provision arrives unexpectedly, it stretches faith. It challenges you to release rigid expectations and trust God's creativity. God is not limited to one method or timeline. He provides in ways that remind you to stay open, attentive, and trusting. What matters most is not how provision comes, but recognizing that God is the source behind it. Often when facing difficulty, the first thing you desire is a solution, an answer, an escape, or a clear path forward. But God frequently begins by strengthening you before changing your situation. This is because lasting solutions require inner strength, not just external change. God knows that without spiritual, emotional, and mental endurance, even the right solution can feel overwhelming. The strength is a form of provision that sustains you through uncertainty. When clarity is absent and problems remain unresolved, God supplies the courage to keep going, the peace to remain steady, and the resilience to endure. This strength may not remove the challenge, but it prevents the challenge from removing you. It allows you to stand firm when circumstances try to shake your faith. God strengthens you through His presence, not just through outcomes. Sometimes the problem remains, but your ability to carry it increases. You may still face pressure, but you are no longer crushed by it. This kind of strength transforms fear into confidence and anxiety into trust. It reminds you that you are not walking alone. Providing strength first also shifts your dependence. Instead of trusting in quick fixes, you learn to rely on God daily. Strength builds patience, wisdom, and discernment, qualities necessary to recognize the right solution when it finally appears. Without this preparation, you might rush into the wrong door simply because it opened first. God's provision of strength teaches that victory is not always immediate, but endurance is essential. The strength you receive today prepares you for tomorrow's breakthrough. Even when answers are delayed, the strength God provides ensures that you remain faithful, hopeful, and ready for what comes next. Waiting is rarely comfortable, but it is often necessary. When nothing seems to be moving and progress feels slow, it can appear as though time is being wasted. In reality, waiting seasons are some of the most productive moments in your spiritual journey. God uses these periods not to delay your life, but to prepare you for what is coming next. Preparation happens internally before it becomes visible externally. While you are waiting, God is shaping your character, refining your priorities, and strengthening your faith. He teaches patience where there was haste, humility where there was pride, and trust where there was fear. These inner changes are essential because they determine how well you will handle the blessing when it arrives. Waiting seasons also clarify purpose. When distractions are removed and forward movement slows, you gain time to reflect, pray, and listen. God often uses silence to realign your heart with His will. What you once thought you wanted may change, and what truly matters becomes clearer. This alignment prevents you from stepping into opportunities that look good but are not meant for you. God uses waiting to develop discipline and consistency. Faith that endures without immediate reward becomes strong and stable. Obedience in the waiting proves that your trust is rooted in God, not in outcomes. This kind of faith prepares you for responsibility, leadership, and long-term growth. Waiting seasons also protect you. If certain doors open too early, you might walk into situations you are not equipped to handle. God's delay is often His mercy, shielding you from unnecessary struggle or failure. What feels like a pause is actually God ensuring that everything is in place. Though waiting can feel heavy, it is never empty. God is actively preparing you even when nothing appears to be happening. The ground is being made ready, foundations are being laid, and strength is being built for what lies ahead. Human understanding is limited by experience, logic, visible resources. When faced with overwhelming challenges, the mind naturally concludes that certain situations are impossible. But God is not restricted by human limits. What appears unreachable, irreversible, or hopeless to you is fully within God's power to change. Impossibility is not a barrier to God. It is often the stage where His power is revealed most clearly. God specializes in situations where human effort ends. When strength runs out, when options disappear, and when hope seems gone, God's ability becomes evident. He does not need favorable odds or perfect conditions. He works beyond probability, logic, and expectation. What you call impossible, God calls an opportunity to demonstrate His authority and faithfulness. Impossibility also serves a purpose in strengthening faith. If everything could be solved by human effort, there would be no need for trust. God allows situations that exceed your ability so that you learn to depend on Him rather than on your own understanding. These moments teach you that faith is not about what you can do. It is about believing what God can do. When facing the impossible, God often changes the outcome by changing the approach. He may not remove the challenge immediately, but He provides wisdom, direction, and an endurance to move forward step by step. The solution may come gradually in ways you do not recognize at first. God's power is not always loud or dramatic. It is often steady and precise. Believing that God can do the impossible shifts your perspective. Fear gives way to expectation, and doubt is replaced with hope. Even when circumstances remain unchanged, your confidence changes because you know that God is greater than what you face. Impossibility does not define the end of the story. It simply marks the place where God begins to work. Human understanding is shaped by limited knowledge, past experiences, and immediate perception. You interpret life based on what you can see and feel in the moment. God, however, operates from a perspective that is eternal, complete, and perfect. His ways are not bound by human reasoning, and His decisions are not restricted by what seems logical or predictable. What confuses you may already make perfect sense in God's plan. There are moments when God's actions or His silence do not align with what you expect. You may question why certain doors closed, why opportunities were delayed, or why prayers were answered differently than you hoped. These moments are not evidence of God's absence, but proof that He is working on a level beyond your understanding. God sees outcomes you cannot foresee and prevents consequences you do not yet recognize. God's higher ways are often protective. He may redirect you from paths that appear promising but would ultimately cause harm. He may allow difficulty because it develops strength, wisdom, and faith that comfort never could. What feels like loss may actually be preparation for something greater. God's perspective considers not only what you want now, but what you need long term. Learning to trust God's ways requires humility. It means accepting that you do not have all the answers and that God's wisdom exceeds your own. This trust grows when you release the need to control outcomes and instead focus on obedience and faithfulness. Understanding is not always immediate, but clarity often comes with time. When you accept that God's ways are higher, frustration turns into peace. You stop demanding explanations and start resting in trust. Even when you do not understand what God is doing, you can be confident that He is doing what is right, purposeful, and aligned with His perfect will. One of the most important aspects of God's provision is that He often supplies peace before solutions. Human nature craves immediate answers, clear direction, and visible outcomes, but God works differently. Before the storm is calmed, before the door opens, and before the problem is solved, God provides a peace that surpasses understanding. This peace is not dependent on circumstances. It is anchored in His presence, His promises, and His faithfulness. Peace before answers teaches reliance. When life is confusing or overwhelming, the natural response is panic, worry, or frustration. God's peace interrupts that reaction, allowing you to stand firm even when you do not have the solution. It gives your mind clarity, your heart courage, and your spirit stability. This peace equips you to make wise decisions instead of acting out of fear or desperation. God's peace also strengthens faith. It reminds you that you are not alone, even when the path ahead is unclear. While your mind races with questions, God reassures your soul that He is in control. Peace in the midst of uncertainty becomes a visible sign of trust in Him. You may not understand what is happening, but you can rest in the assurance that God's power and wisdom are greater than your circumstances. Another aspect is preparation. Before receiving answers, God prepares your heart to receive them correctly. He softens resistance, calms anxiety, and aligns your will with His. If He provided answers without first giving peace, you might respond with fear, pride, or confusion. By giving peace first, God ensures that when the solution comes, you are ready to accept it with clarity, gratitude, and confidence. This principle also reveals God's priority. He cares more about your spiritual and emotional well-being than about immediate results. He wants you to grow, trust, and mature during the process, not just arrive at a solution. Peace before answers is a divine strategy to strengthen character, deepen faith, and sustain hope. Even when the problem persists and the outcome is unknown, the peace God gives becomes a constant anchor. It allows you to rest, to keep moving forward, and to trust that the answers will come in the right time, in the right way, and through the right means. This peace is a gift that carries you through the storm until God's provision is fully revealed.